board games have a special place in my heart. Every Friday, my parents and my sister and I would sit down and play a board game. We played a different one every time. It wasn't always made by Hasbro, but more times than not, it really was. One of my favorites was the Game of Life, and while it's not available to play on this title, it is on the next one in the series. This one has 5 classic board and electronic games: Operation, Jenga, Connect 4x4, Bop-it, and Picture Rica. None of these titles took that long to play, but they will bring back the sense of wonder and fun you used to have playing these games. However, is it worth your money? Let's take a look at each of the games one by one. Operation. This one has you removing foreign parts from a human being. This freak show thought he would give the doctors a laugh and put in funny sounding names into his body. Like he stuck butterflies in his stomach and put a tennis racket in his elbow. Get it? Tennis elbow? Don't ask me how he got a tennis racket in his elbow. That will be a mystery that will stay with him. This one was one of my favorites on this compilation. It was simple yet fun. You pick a card and then remove the piece that comes up. For some reason, no matter what part you're going for, you always retrieve it through his butt. So you're always going to go in elbow deep to retrieve these items. And, wow, buddy. I think you have some other major problems. Look at all those lesions and boils. I love the fact that you want to give your doctors a laugh by putting in funny objects, but if this is how your insides look, you need to look at your priorities. As you pull out the offending object, you have to twist your Wiimote through the picture outlines. Depending on the object, the outline that you have to travel through will be larger or smaller. If you make too many mistakes, you're going to have to abandon your magical journey through his rectum. It was really fun and I liked it, but it was nowhere near as hard as the original game. Jenga. This one's pretty simple. You just take turns pulling out blocks from this tower. The first one who makes it fall over loses. Now I know this isn't the first time that Jenga has come to the Wii. I heard there was a pretty awful translation to the Wii already, aptly named Jenga. Luckily I've never played it and I don't think I ever will. The major problem I had was the lack of good feel on how smoothly the pieces were coming out. I don't blame the programmers for this one because it was very hard to translate this type of game. Even though Boom Blocks did a great job a couple years back. It was fun to play for a few minutes and it could be an interesting party game, but it's not really one of those that'll keep your attention for long. Bop-it. There are a few games out there that are not suited for a video game translation, and I think this is one of them. It just didn't feel right to play this game on the Wii. It was really something that you needed to hold in your hand to do the movements. The object of this game is easy. You just keep making the movements they told you to do on the screen until you screw up. Sure, some of the moves could be done, but a lot of them had you do special movements with the Wiimote, and it just wasn't natural to do them. Plus, I think the motion controls were a bit broken on this one. Even when I did a perfect motion like they wanted me to, it still didn't read it right all the time. So sometimes I got a bad score for no good reason at all. But at the very least, I have to give some props for them to at least attempt a faithful representation of the game. It was a bold idea to try and use the motion controls to recreate Bop-it, but unfortunately, it just didn't work that well. Connect 4x4. Connect 4x4 is having one of the players connect 4 of the same color discs vertically, horizontally, or diagonally before the other player can do it. Now they changed things up from the classic version by having you use both sides of the board. Most of the time you would drop one-sided discs, but you could choose to change to a both-sided one if you had one available. The whole concept of playing both sides would have been a lot better if they showed you on the screen what the other side looked like. Instead you have to see what the color is behind the main board. I understand they wanted to put a little bit of strategy in the game, but it was at times very confusing to play. And honestly I wish they would have just stuck with the original concept. It was perfect the way it was. Picture Rica. Now this one was a lot of fun. They have you find different things inside a jumbled set of pictures. The things that you had to find were determined on the card that you had to draw, and the dice roll that you got. I like the various ways you could play the game. It's not always find the object first sort of thing. Sometimes it's a challenge to find how many you can find, or my favorite to kind of name that tune-esque challenge, where you bet to see how many things you could find in a picture. The controls work perfectly, but since the controls were basically just point and click, it's not that surprising. To extend the replay in all these games, there are special versions of them all to play. They were called remixed versions. They were just different ways to play the games. They were interesting and definitely had some value to them. As you play the different games, you'll unlock parts and clothes for your Mr. Potato Head. So there is some incentive in getting good scores and playing all the games. Plus there's a game show mode which will have you face off against other players to find out who is the best at all the mini games. They'll have you spin a wheel and when it picks the game, it brings up a miniaturized version of the games that you've been playing. Normally it's just do one thing or get the best score. You move forward on a board, and the goal is to get to the heart space before your opponent. If you do that, you'll get a heart added to your character. At the end of the few rounds, you play a bunch of mini games against your opponent. If you lose, you forfeit a heart, and if you lose them all, you lose the game. I thought the game show was a little too slow moving, and it really wasn't anything I would come back to play. Hasbro Family Games 2 was okay. I bought the game for a whopping price of $4, and I would say I pretty much got my money's worth. I'm glad I got it really cheap, because I don't think it's worth the $40 they're currently asking for it. If you have young children, they might enjoy this game. Most of the titles were just simplified versions of well-known board games, so it might be fun for them. I would say if your children like these games, you should rent this title. But if you're kind of indifferent to them, I would say skip this game.